Hello from the end of the video. We're going to go through our recap, but it is our pre-cap. Today we cover where you are going to pull your ideas from. There are three main ones. We have our real-life experiences, we have some mechanic-based ideas and story-based ideas. There isn't really a limit on this, but these are the three main ones that I personally draw from. And then you just want to check if this would make a compelling game. And this is basically checking against what we covered in the previous video of mystery, experience, and interaction. And once you've determined if it's something that could become a game, then you start brainstorming, where you're just going to dump your ideas, you're going to refine your ideas, and then we also talk about keyframe moments, which is a term pulled from animation, but basically you're just trying to pick out what are the key moments for your game. And then finally we talk about design pillars for a while. I go into my own personal design pillars as an example, but in general you are going to basically take your tastes, you're going to try and simplify them down, and then basically use them as a framework, and you'll use that to help make a holistic game, a more holistic game. So that is what we're going to cover. I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you in a second. So picking up from where we left off last time, I was discussing Pokemon, and I actually went and looked up the designer's name, because I should know that, and it is Satoshi Tahiri. And I basically said that the idea for Pokemon came from wanting to recreate the feeling of going out and catching bugs and making them fight, and why that kind of resonates on a base level. But that leads into the topic I wanted to discuss, which is where to pull ideas from for games. And I came up with three that I like, but I guess we can just leave that for now. There really isn't any limit. Basically, if anything resonates with you, you could theoretically make a game out of it, and it can be anything from like super abstract to super realistic. Personally, for me, the one that I think you'll get the best results from is pulling from real life experiences, which is why the Pokemon the Pokemon story comes to mind. Real life experiences. And the reason I think that is because your real life experiences are going to be things that many people have also dealt with, maybe not to like the same extent as you, but it's going to be something that will resonate with a larger group of people. And so there's that, but I also think this is more interesting from a design perspective of trying to turn things that are not math-based into something that is math, or at least rules-based. So like trying to create rules and systems that will replicate why a thing that you experienced in real life, or not why, but like how something you experienced in real life forms in, or like would express itself in a game. And I think that's like the interesting part of game design. But then there's also like if you have an interesting mechanic idea. Oops. So that would be anything like like a way that combat works, or like a system for I don't know, like physics. This isn't something that I generally start with, but when you get into designing a game, like if you're designing something based on like a real life experience, you might run into like, oh, there's something that doesn't work for this, but it is a cool mechanic, and then I could build off of that later. This would often be for like a smaller scope game, but I think that that's a good place to work from. And then there's story ideas, and I think that this stories can get interjected into these other two, but you can definitely just have a story idea and use kind of like cliche tropes to fill out the story. Or not trope. Yeah, I guess tropes. As far as mechanics are concerned, you can use tropes, but then like settings and stuff like that, and aesthetics. You can kind of fall back on stuff that comes across as familiar, so that you're able to focus more on the story idea. So once you have an idea, and I guess just for me, a lot of my ideas come from like weird dreams that I have, and so I tend to keep a journal or notepad kind of just spread around or on me. Like I keep a little notepad in my backpack when I go places, so that if I have an idea that crosses my mind, I can write it down, and so it doesn't get lost, like if I am struck with inspiration. And I would highly recommend doing that if you're going to be, just kind of generating game ideas. But so let's say you have an idea, and then we want to ask the question, is it compelling? Is it compelling? Whoa, that C kind of disappeared. Compelling. I think I spelled that right. And then this is going to get into what I talked about before, and I'm not going to go deep on this because the whole previous video was basically on that, but mystery, emotion, and interaction. Ooh, okay, well, that kind of got messy, but I don't think a game idea necessarily has to like knock all three of these out of the park, but it should have at least one of these things that it does well, and then the better that you can get on the other two, the stronger your game is going to resonate with people. I think an emotion is going to be like the core of that, but if you have a fun way to interact with something, that's going to kind of skirt these two for that interaction. So something like that would be like combat. Mystery is going to be more of like a narrative thing, but you can touch on basically any of these. But you just kind of want to make sure that you can make a game out of it, and to make a game, you're going to need these three aspects. So you just kind of want to take your idea and put it into this framework of, can I make a game that is going to have some form of mystery, emotion, and interaction to it. So from there, normally what I do is I just start brainstorming, and this I usually just kind of let go on in the background. So you're going to want to just kind of like dump all of your ideas for the game onto a piece of paper. So just dump everything and put it all into one list somewhere. Normally I have a legal pad, but you can kind of see in the background here I have a whiteboard, just somewhere that I can just like spew stuff out. just as it comes to mind, just anything that I think would be cool in the game, anything that like I think would be needed for the game, and just dump all of it. And when I was just starting out, this was like huge, just like everything that would come out of me, and that was like, that's good. But what you're looking for is to basically find keyframes, which I'm stealing from animation, but you want keyframes for the game. And what I mean by this is either experiences or parts of the game that are going to be like the iconic thing that makes your game stand out. It's the thing that makes your game feel like, I don't know. So like in animation, keyframes are like, you'll have I don't know, what's coming to mind is combat. And so like you'll have the frame where you like your person has their sword outstretched. You should probably give them a head. But then you need the frame before that where there's like they're holding the sword back before they strike, and then you need the like follow through after that. And there's frames in between these animations, but the keyframes are the ones that like define what that motion looks like. Those are like the highlight points, and that's what you're basically trying to figure out for your game, is the key parts of it. And so what you're going to do is just kind of sift through your giant list of everything and whittle it down, and in the process you're going to try and find the core of your game. And that's kind of tough. It might not be initially what you thought when you started dumping everything out, but that's going to be like what the player's doing most of the time in the game, and that's going to actually, let me write that down. Oops. What player does in your game. And so for like the experience one, so if you're going for like a real life experience, this is going to be like, what is the experience you want them to feel? If it's an interesting mechanic, this is going to be how that mechanic is used. If it's a story, it's what are the like key parts, or like the main point of your story. Like what are you trying to tell with that story? And yeah, so that's your goal, is to try and figure out what the core is. This can take a lot of time to get through, but I think it's important because it lets you be creative and just go wherever you want and get everything into one spot, and then you're going to make choices on what gets you to your core, or like you're going to get to what makes your game the game, like. And so on the topic of your core, I briefly want to touch on gameplay loops. Gameplay loops, if my pen would work. Okay. And gameplay loops are basically cycles of gameplay, cycles of play. So there is. I'll throw out an example. There's a game called Moonlighter, and in that you spend your nights doing like dungeon crawl. It's a roguelite, I guess. Yeah, a roguelite. So you go through these different rooms, sort of Zelda style. You collect stuff, and then you head out and go back to a shop that you own, and then you sell the stuff. You also need items and money to upgrade your weapons so that you can progress further into the dungeons, and as you progress further you get more stuff and you come back. And so you have these kind of like back and forth aspects of the game, and that leads to pacing and variety, so that you aren't just you aren't overflowing the player with a certain feeling. So, and like Doom, the 2016 Doom, kind of fails in the variety part. It's a good game, but it's just high octane the whole time, and there's a little bit of like exploring, but for the most part you're just kind of going and going and going and going, and it can just get tiresome after a while. I kind of bounced off of that game. I didn't finish it. But like Moonlighter and games that kind of like have a cycle that you're going through is a good way to keep things interesting for your player. So you'll have these moments of like high stress, and then you'll have these other moments that kind of diffuse that tension and let your player just kind of take a breath. I want to do a deeper video on this, so I'm not going to get too much into it, but it is something to be aware of, is that you want to, if you can find a gameplay loop within your brainstorm, that's usually a good thing. So like if you can oscillate between two different types of interaction or action. But what I really wanted to get into are design pillars and how you can go about choosing your own design pillars, because as a designer, how you want to sculpt games is what is going to set you apart from other people. And so design pillars are going to be aspects of games that you prefer. Okay. And so this will dictate how you're going to sculpt your games. So I don't know, sculpting games, and it's basically the framework with which you're going to push your ideas. And these don't, I don't want to like say that you're going to be limited to these, because they can change. There's nothing like set about. Okay, well, that's cool. Hopefully that's not too distracting. Yeah, so design pillars, these aren't immutable. Like, you can change how you like to design, especially as you're learning things. Like, that will change how you view the structure of games. But this is going to be a good like place for you to draw from when you're designing things, because it's going to just kind of be like a set. It's your toolbox. It's how you're going to go about putting things together, and it just having it set for yourself is a good way to just be able to quickly cycle through if an idea is working for you or not. And so I probably should have been writing this stuff down, but can change provides a framework. Okay. So I'm going to kind of give some just like general stuff here, and then I'll go through and explain my design pillars as an example, and then just let you kind of figure what works for you from there, because everybody's tastes are different. But basically you'll want to get these to be as simple as possible, like as simple concept as possible. Ooh. Concept as possible. And it's what this will do is it will let you basically have it how do I want to word this? If it's a simple concept, it can apply to more things, so you have a more varied tool to work with. So it's not going to express itself in a very specific way, but it's a kind of like a guideline with which you can tool an idea to. And I mean, this is going to help you refine your ideas quicker. Refine ideas quicker. And yeah, so just think about like what sorts of games you enjoy, why you enjoy them. So like what you enjoy leads into why you enjoy it, and then how can you use that when you're kind of putting a bunch of ideas together. And so I'm just gonna go into my examples because that works better for me personally. I just it helps if I see how somebody does something, because then I can apply my own thoughts to that. If this still doesn't really make sense, feel free to ask in the comments. I can totally just talk with you and do my best to help you get to an understanding on this. So actually I will just say, oops. Okay. Nick's design pillars. Example. Okay, so primarily for me, I like to focus on simplicity. Like I said, I come from a background in board games, and so the more simple you can make something, the easier it's going to be for somebody to pick up. So it's easier for players. But on top of that, it's also easier to manage as a designer, and easier to manage. And what I mean by this is like using small numbers, just like small systems. Wow, I am missing all sorts of letters today. And basically things along those lines. And I don't know, like what comes to mind as far as like not following this is if you've ever played Yu-Gi-Oh, they like to use numbers in the hundreds. So like you'll have 10 or you'll have 1,000 damage or 700 damage in defense and stuff like that, which is cool. But the real reason that they do this stuff is so that they can work with these numbers, but then they push you into fractions without you realizing it. So there's a lot of like 750 and 775. Oops, 775. And this becomes a lot of deeper math that people don't really want to well, it's not that they don't want to deal with it, but it just becomes something that they have to deal with. So if you can just use, like small integers, it just becomes a lot easier for standard people to work with. And so I try and apply that throughout all my games. And so like my rules sheets, if I can't fit it onto like 1, maybe 2 pages, it's too much. You should be able to like read a paragraph to get through how a game is played, in my opinion. Granted, there are more complex systems, and so you might need to like explain stuff, but the basic aspects of your game should be able to be clearly expressed in a simple manner. And so simplicity is key for me. Moving on from that, let's do a capital I. Interconnectivity. And what I mean by this is that every aspect, or each part of the game, ties into the game as a whole. Every part matters. So if you're designing something for your game, it shouldn't just be some like random outlier. It should connect into how other aspects of the game play out. And I guess this could be like modular design. But basically, you don't want anything to feel like it's sitting out and just its own weird little thing. So like you don't want a character that just is there but doesn't contribute to the story. You don't want mechanics that either like supersede all of your other mechanics, so like a superpower weapon or something like that. Like everything needs to play within the same rule set, and there needs to be some sort of check to any certain aspect. And then from there, player expression. Is very important to me. So this is methods for individual play. And what I mean by this is, like, if you're going off a modular design, that the player is able to take, if there's 9 different things in your game, they get to choose which 4 of the 9 they want to play with. And this gives them a way to, one, compare the different aspects of the game, and so they come up with their own ideas, but then it also lets them be themselves. Like, they don't have to form into like your preconceived archetypes. This can have kind of like drawbacks in that it might feel a little bland for some people, that there isn't like cohesion between the different parts, but you can kind of tweak and turn these knobs so that they hit those different feelings for people. It just kind of depends on what your overall idea is. And then finally, respecting the player. And basically, what this comes down to is no hand-holding. I assume that if somebody is picking up a game that they have a mind for wanting to play games. And so it kind of plays into the player expression, but just like I was saying, with they get to choose how to put these pieces together. That lets them figure stuff out for themselves without needing to be told how to do something, and that being told how to do something can make people feel dumb. It also makes you as a designer feel a little overbearing. So I try and be as hands-off. Like, I will set down the core rules. Like, in order to play this game, you must do these steps, but how you do those steps is up to you. And I don't really have a good example for this for video games, but like most board games that I play, I try and keep it just to like a core set of rules and give them tools to put into those different steps of the rules so that the outcome is unpredictable, but it's guided by their desires. And I lost my pen. And that is basically all that I wanted to cover today. And those are kind of like the four main design pillars for me. I have a bunch of opinions on like a lot of other things. There's like the minute-to-minute decisions that you need to make as you're designing a game and just deciding what stays and what goes, how to go about implementing things like that. But by following these core principles or these core pillars, I'm able to make those decisions in a way that seems more holistic. And I think that's kind of the point of all of this, is to make a holistic game. Holistic game. And so by that's terrible. Yeah, you want your game to feel like it all makes sense at the end, and I think by making sure like every decision that you make is all coming from the same place will help intrinsically let you shape your idea into a cohesive whole. Yeah, so let's just do a quick recap. So we discussed where to pull ideas from. To begin with, pull ideas from, and this can be IRL experiences, interesting mechanics, and story, among other things. There is no limit, but no real limit. But those are kind of the main three that I find. And then you just want to check to see if it's compelling. Is it compelling? Can it be shaped into a game, basically? can it be a game? And if not, that's not a big deal. You just kind of roll into the the next idea. And then brainstorming, where you're just dumping ideas. Dump ideas. Dump ideas. And then you want to refine those ideas. And then we also talked about keyframe moments. For your game. We briefly touched on gameplay loops, but I'm not going to write that down. And then design pillars. And this is your tastes, and you want these to be simple. And what this gives you is a framework to build from. Ooh, that's not good. Oop. Framework was frame was alright. Work was not. So this gives you a framework to build from, and then it will help you make a more holistic game. Help make a holistic game. And I think that's gonna do it for this one. I appreciate you guys sitting through it if you made it this far. Yeah. We'll see you next time.